Hello, you have Chris and Eli here again from Landlord Gurus, and this is the third installment in our Scary Stories from Landlord Gurus series. Today, Chris is going to tell us one of his horror stories about something that came up, one of these many things that can sometimes do come up in the course of being a landlord that you then have to figure out what to do about. So, Chris, you had a tenant who was less than sanitary, let's say. You want to tell us about what happened?
Yeah. So it was a tenant that had been there for a little while. Didn't have any issues with him, paid rent on time, everything like that for a while. Probably a year into his residency, like something broke. We had a handyman come in and fix it. And when he was done, he reported back that the conditions inside the apartment were just, unsanitary, dirty, messy, bugs crawling around. And most importantly, I think he had stacked a bunch of furniture and cardboard boxes and stuff like that, like kind of right in front of the heater. And so
Okay.
that was sort of what he brought to our attentions, like this, be potential fire hazard.
Yeah.
So I scheduled an inspection, which I hadn't done since he had moved in. So it was about a year after he moved in. So I scheduled an inspection, went in and took a look, and yeah, sure enough, it was very cluttered, garbage, bags of garbage on the floor, food on the floor, on the furniture, everything like that. And the floor was basically covered with stuff you couldn't walk through to get to anywhere.
Right.
And, the tenant was there. I pointed everything out to him and he understood that, yeah, it was messy. And, I guess I mostly highlighted that, this is unsanitary, that people are complaining that they are seeing bugs in their apartments.
And had other tenants mentioned this particular tenant?
Like as I was there that day, I think I talked to somebody shortly before walking in, and they were like, "Yeah, go. I've been noticing things, so
Yeah.
go check on it, please."
Yeah.
And originally, it was mostly to make sure that it was not a fire hazard. So anyway, I'd sort of outlined all this verbally to him. He
Right.
understood, and he said he would get on it and clean it, and he did. And I
Wow.
think I went back and said, I'll be back in a week. I'll check on it again. And
Uh,
so I did, and it was, went back a week later and it was not sparkling clean, but the stuff was off the floor. Nothing was in front of the heater. It
yeah.
wasn't.
What were your standards? How did you think about it ahead of time about what you were going to accept versus not accept?
Yeah. So this was a first for me. I'd never, experienced anything like this. I've always had tenants that may not have been the cleanest, but always kept things in a safe and, sanitary manner. So I
Yeah.
never experienced anything like this where it was just kind of unsanitary and a fire hazard. So my standards were, okay, let's make it not a fire hazard, move everything away from the heater. It needs to be first and foremost, not going to
Right.
catch on fire. And then second, I mean, if he's happy with stuff on his bed and boxes on his bed or whatever, that's fine by me. But, bags of garbage should be thrown in the dumpster. It's just right outside. Things.
Yeah.
So that was the level that I, sort of expected from him and kind of outlined to him, like, let's do it this way.
But
And
I mean, I think my guess is that you were after kind of a food in particular, right? Right.
food, yeah,
Because
yeah,
you need to remove the draw for bugs,
exactly.
ants or other bugs and anything that can decay. And I think it's clear to most people, but it's worth pointing out that food, anything that can decay or that is moist, that stays on surfaces, your surfaces, part of the property, will degrade, stain, rot,
Exactly. You get mold.
discolor, they're living in a dirty manner can damage places.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and it also, just to go back up a minute, this highlights why it's really important to do regular inspections of all units. Some people do it every 6 months. I find it's a lot, but at least every year.
Yeah. Yeah. I do now. One
Yeah,
of the things I did
nobody
before.
wants to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I never expected it to be quite like this. But yeah, so this was, the first time, and he cleaned it to in a satisfactory manner. But then about another year later, I got an alert from another tenant that had mentioned the unit adjacent to his, where she was then saying that they were getting flies and bugs, and they'd noticed while walking past his unit that there were flies in the windows and things like that. And so they brought it to my attention again, and I scheduled an inspection, and I thought it was bad before. It was way worse.
Really.
Yeah. And it almost appeared like nothing had been done in the year since I was there previously.
Well, it might have been the case. I mean, given that.
Yeah, like he cleaned it and then just let it deteriorate again, and a lot more food. There were visibly a lot of flies various different kinds of bugs. And in this case, yeah, I think I'd learned something from the time before, and it was okay. I'm gonna issue you a 3-day comply or vacate notice. We're not going to let this drag on any longer.
Yeah.
That's what we have here in Washington. It may be different in different states, but
And describe why that's important, though, as opposed to just sending an email or talking it over. Why did you choose to do it?
well, I wanted to make it an official legal notice, something that he would then definitely have to comply with, and if he didn't, that there would be grounds to have him vacate. And there were some other issues that had cropped up in the couple months before this as well, where he had missed.
Sounds like somebody was having a hard time.
Yeah, he missed a couple of rent payments and things like that, or was late. So this was kind of the first step if he wasn't gonna clean and with the comply or vacate, it has nothing to do with rent payments or anything like that. It's complying to the terms of the lease. So in this case, it entailed outlining which clauses of the lease that he was in non-compliance with. In this case, it was keeping the unit in a sanitary and safe, habitable manner, whatever the clause in the lease states,
Yeah, and by doing that, you took the first step down the road towards, if you needed to, compelling him to vacate, right? So nobody wants to fill out forms or be kind of harsh with notices that comply or vacate. It's kind of harsh, but you kind of have to do it early. These types of things. If it's not going well, it generally is good to take the official step. Not that you necessarily want to follow it out to its end to have somebody vacate, but at least you've taken that first step. Whereas you'd have to take it again if all you had done is send an email.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would have been, like it was before, where he might clean for a little bit, but then,
right,
or even just not do it, and conceivably, I could have given him a verbal warning and then come back a week later, and it wouldn't be clean, and you have to do it again, and the next thing, it's.
And there are laws, depending on location, about how many violations constitute grounds for termination of a tenancy as well. So what comes to mind here is a rent payment. I think it's 4, if there have been four late rent payments in the course of a year, even if the tenant has paid up, ultimately that number of late payments is, I believe I have it right, is then grounds for eviction. And it may be the case and it's probably different in different locations, so you'd want to check, but you just having cited a lease violation documented is an important thing to do. So anyway, Chris, did you consider what your next step would be if this tenant did not clean up the mess?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would have been carrying through with the comply or vacate, right?
Would this have been a health department issue, do you think? Because that sometimes kind of the official entities if there's a problem on site, somebody's got a dangerous situation for, let's say they didn't move the stuff away from the heater. And they won't. The next course of action may be to call the fire department, because they have the power to compel somebody to remove the dangerous condition. And it could have been, if he hadn't complied, it might have been the next step would be to call the health department.
Could have been, yeah. I mean, I honestly, I didn't think that far out in terms of what I would have needed to do by, just first course of action is like, hey, let's get this cleaned up. Here's your official notice, so let's do it. And I with the thinking that would be compelling enough for him to follow through, which he did.
Yeah, most people are reasonable.
Yeah,
even if
I think when I pointed it out to him, I think I mean, I don't know exactly what he was going through. He was clearly going through something. And he did recognize that, this is not how it should be. But I think he needed something for him to actually get started with it and actually follow through and do it.
So what are your takeaways from having done it? If this happens again, what do you know having gone through this already?
Yeah, well, like you said, an inspection, regular inspections are super critical. And once a year, and I think once a year generally is probably pretty good. After having the first inspection after the first year and seeing the condition it was, I think maybe I would have scheduled more frequent inspections with them. Just knowing, like, okay, we've got a history, so now we need to do it once every 6 months or once every 3 months or whatever it is. And then the other takeaway is, like you mentioned before, be diligent with those notices. Just get it documented, get it on record. Not necessarily saying to you have to follow through with it and have them evicted, but it's get it documented, because sometimes that's all they need is just that official notice, and then it hits home for them and they can move forward from there. So
right. Right. Good takeaways. It sounds like ultimately things turned out okay and wasn't a total horror story, but no fun for him or for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was definitely a bit of a horror story, just with the creepy crawlies, since we
Yeah.
are on Halloween, sort of,
And when it impacts other tenants,
you know,
that's stressful, because then
exactly.
you start wanting to bail out, and yeah,
Right.
you could have a problem. So.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Anything else before we sign off?
No, yeah, that's about it. But yeah, everything turned out just fine down the road.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
good.
Great. Well, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share this channel with anybody you think might be interested. And if you subscribe, you'll get a notification when we put out our next episodes, and you can come back and see what we're talking about next time. Thanks for watching.
Bye.